Walk through the prime retail districts of Europe or Asia today, and you might sense a ghost. It is the faded outline of a logo that once dominated the global high street, a bold red stencil that signaled cool, casual confidence to an entire generation. But while the brand itself has largely evaporated from the physical landscape, the massive wealth it generated did not disappear. It was quietly, methodically transferred into the pockets of one man who understood something the rest of the world missed. This is the story of Michael Ying. He did not just run a clothing company, he engineered a financial miracle that drove a 30-fold increase in value. Most people remember Esprit as a sunny California hippie brand founded by Americans in a Volkswagen bus. That was the carefully curated image. The reality was a ruthless, efficient financial powerhouse driven entirely by Hong Kong capital and Asian manufacturing. This is not just a story about clothes, it is a masterclass in global supply chain economics, perfect market timing, and the rare discipline of knowing exactly when to walk away. We see similar structural failures in the collapse of retailers like Forever 21, but the scale of wealth preservation here is unique. If you value deep dives into the intersection of heritage and global economics, hit that subscribe button now. We are about to dismantle the engine of a billion-dollar empire. To understand how this empire was built, we need to look back at Hong Kong in the 1970s. This was the era before the city transformed into a gleaming financial hub, back when it was the gritty, humming factory of the world. It was a place where textiles were king, and if you knew how to navigate the chaotic web of garment factories, you held the keys to the global market. Michael Ying started his career right on the factory floor. He was not a financier with an MBA. He was a laborer who understood the visceral reality of production. He knew the precise cost of a button, the time it took to stitch a hem, and exactly where the margins could be squeezed. By 1970, he had leveraged this grit into a role as a sourcing agent, but he was looking for more than just a commission. Enter Douglas and Susie Tompkins. The American founders of Esprit had a vision of colorful, spirited fashion that captured the optimism of the West Coast. They had the creative genius, but they lacked the operational machinery to scale it. In 1971, they partnered with Ying. They needed Asian efficiency to make their California dream affordable for the masses. It was a partnership that would fundamentally alter the trajectory of the fashion industry. Ying became their sole sourcing agent in Hong Kong. But to call him an agent understates his influence. He was the architect of the supply chain that made the brand viable. While the Tompkins family was focused on the aesthetic, the what, and Ying was obsessively refining the how. He built a network of suppliers that could deliver quality goods at speeds and prices that American manufacturers simply could not touch. This was the beginning of the vertical integration that would later define the industry. He did not stop at sourcing. Ying established Esprit Far East, a distinct entity from the American parent company. This was a critical strategic move. He secured the rights to the Asian market, effectively separating the manufacturing engine from the creative marketing arm. It gave him autonomy. As the brand exploded in popularity during the 1980s, the American founders were celebrating their cultural cachet. Meanwhile, thousands of miles away, Ying was building the financial and logistical infrastructure that would eventually become powerful enough to swallow the American parent company whole. The dynamic was set. The West provided the face, but the East provided the muscle. Ying understood early on that the person who controls the production controls the destiny of the brand. He was patient, methodical, and quietly accumulating the capital and leverage he would need for the next phase of his master plan. While the world watched the models and the catalogs, Michael Ying was watching the balance sheets very closely. Throughout the 1980s and the 1990s, the global fashion industry began to fracture. Most Western brands were scrambling to outsource production, desperate to shed assets and focus solely on marketing. Michael Ying looked at this trend and did the exact opposite. He constructed a massive, aggressive machine of vertical integration. He understood that in a volatile market, control is the only true currency. Ying did not just want to be the agent finding the factories, he wanted to dominate the entire life cycle of the garment. This meant controlling the sourcing of raw cotton, overseeing the dyeing vats, managing the stitching lines, and dictating exactly how the final product was folded on a shelf in Kowloon or Berlin. This was not merely about quality control, it was about margin protection and speed. When you control every single link in the chain, you stop leaking profit to middlemen and third-party logistics firms. You also gain the ability to react. While competitors were stuck waiting months for samples to cross the Pacific, Ying's infrastructure could pivot production based on real-time sales data. He turned the supply chain into a weapon. This operational discipline generated a torrent of cash, and Ying knew exactly how to deploy it. In 1993, he took Esprit Far East public on the Hong Kong Stock Exchange. This was the turning point. The IPO provided the massive war chest needed to execute his long-term vision. While the original American parent company began to stumble, weighed down by creative differences and the erratic nature of the US retail market, the Hong Kong entity was operating with the efficiency of a sovereign wealth fund. The capital raised was not for celebration, it was for conquest. The inevitable conclusion arrived in 2002. The balance of power had shifted so dramatically that the Asian subsidiary swallowed the American parent. Ying bought out the remaining interests, consolidating total global control in Hong Kong. It was a stunning reversal of the traditional colonial economic model. Usually Western capital exploits Eastern labor. Here, Eastern operational excellence acquired Western intellectual property. The brand that began with a hippie ethos in San Francisco was now entirely commanded from a boardroom in Hong Kong. This ushered in what we now call the golden era of Esprit. To the average consumer in Europe or Australia, nothing had changed. Esprit remained the definitive cool girl uniform, a symbol of relaxed, aspirational Western life. But financially, the company had transformed. Every striped shirt sold in Munich and every tote bag sold in London sent profits flowing directly into Asian coffers. The brand was the mask. The business was the machine. The efficiency of this machine was terrifying to competitors. In Hong Kong, Esprit's sales per square foot were 3 times the industry average. Ying's retail model was scientifically calibrated. He did not view stores as mere showrooms, he viewed them as high-velocity distribution centers. He treated shelf space like prime real estate. If a product did not earn its rent in turnover, the supply chain he built allowed him to cut it instantly and replace it with a winner. It was a level of discipline that traditional retailers simply could not match. This efficiency created a sense of permanence. For a few years, it felt like Esprit was physically woven into the architecture of global commerce, occupying the best corner of every major shopping center. I want to pause here and ask you, do you remember this era? Was Esprit the dominant anchor in your local mall during the early 2000s? Let me know in the comments if you recall just how ubiquitous this brand really was. By 2006, the machine Michael Ying built was humming at a frequency that seemed almost impossible to sustain. The numbers from this period are staggering. Revenue had climbed to 23 billion Hong Kong dollars. The brand had planted its flag in over 40 countries, operating nearly 800 retail stores and managing over 14,000 wholesale points. If you walked through a shopping district in Germany, the Netherlands, or Hong Kong, Esprit was the anchor. It was the gold standard for mass-market retail, commanding a valuation that made it one of the most important stocks on the Hang Seng Index. Investors and analysts viewed it as a perpetual money printer, a company that had finally cracked the code of global fashion. Yet precisely when the applause was loudest, the conductor put down the baton. In 2006, Michael Ying stepped down as chairman. To the public and the shareholders, this was framed as a well-earned retirement for a man who had dedicated 35 years to the company. But if you looked at the transaction logs, a different story was unfolding. This was not just a retirement, it was a liquidation. Between 2003 and 2008, Ying systematically divested his holdings. He did not dump the stock in a panic, which would have crashed the price and alerted the market. Instead, he sold into the strength he had created. Every time the stock hit a new high on the back of record earnings reports, Ying was quietly cashing out. By the time he was done, he had reduced his stake from a controlling interest to a minority position, pocketing over $2 billion in the process. This specific maneuver is the difference between being rich on paper and being wealthy in reality. This is the oracle moment that separates Michael Ying from almost every other retail tycoon. Most founders are blinded by emotional attachment. They believe their own press releases. They think the growth curve will point up forever. Ying, however, looked at his own creation with the cold, detached eye of a sourcing agent. He realized that the vertical integration machine, while powerful, had reached its maximum efficiency. He understood that the brand had saturated its core markets. There was nowhere left to grow without fundamentally changing the business model or eroding margins. There is a profound dramatic irony here. The financial markets were celebrating Esprit's dominance at the exact moment its architect was heading for the exit. Later, Ying would admit that he felt the brand had lost its soul. He recognized that in the pursuit of scale and efficiency, the spark of creativity, the very thing that the Tompkins family had instilled in the 1970s, had been extinguished. The operational excellence that drove the stock price up was simultaneously driving the cultural relevance down. The clothes were selling, but they were no longer leading. They had become commodities, vulnerable to anyone who could make them cheaper or faster. He also likely saw the storm clouds gathering on the horizon. The mid-2000s marked the aggressive rise of a new breed of competitor. Zara and H&M were beginning to rewrite the rules of speed, and Uniqlo was redefining the economics of basics. These were threats that Esprit's 1980s infrastructure was not designed to fight. Ying did not stay to fight a losing war. He secured his dynastic wealth and stepped onto the shore, leaving the ship just before it sailed into the hurricane. It remains one of the most perfectly timed exits in modern corporate history. Once Michael Ying left the building, the discipline that held the empire together evaporated. The company entered a phase that business historians often call strategic drift, but in reality, it was simply ROT. The management teams that followed were operational caretakers, not visionaries. They inherited a high-performance Ferrari and drove it like a municipal bus. They continued to expand the physical footprint, signing expensive, long-term leases for massive flagship stores, convinced that presence equaled relevance. This is where the parallel to Forever 21 becomes striking. Both brands fell victim to the same delusion, mall fatigue. They believed that if you filled enough square footage with enough merchandise, the customer would inevitably show up. They built cathedrals of consumption just as the congregation was stopping to worship at the altar of the smartphone. These massive retail footprints, once assets, turned into suffocating liabilities. The overhead costs were fixed and rising, while foot traffic was variable and falling. It was a strategy built for the 1990s, applied to a digital world. But the real killers were not just internal, they were external and highly specialized. In the 1980s, Esprit could be everything to everyone because the competition was fragmented. By 2010, the market had bifurcated into category killers. On one side, you had Inditex, the parent company of Zara. They did not just have a supply chain, they had a nervous system. Zara could identify a micro-trend on a runway in Paris and have a wearable version in stores in Tokyo within 3 weeks. Esprit, burdened by its legacy 12-month production cycles, was selling fashion that was effectively a year old, the moment it hit the rack. On the other side, you had Uniqlo. The Japanese giant was not playing the trend game, it was playing the materials game. They mastered the science of basics, heat tech, perfect denim, high-quality cotton at a price point that made Esprit's pricing look insulting. Esprit found itself trapped in the mushy middle. It was too expensive to compete with the disposable speed of fast fashion, yet it lacked the distinct quality or brand heat to justify a premium over Uniqlo. It was selling $40 t-shirts in a $10 world. The consumer is ruthless. If you are not the cheapest and you are not the best, you're invisible. To combat this, the new leadership made the fatal mistake of addiction. They got hooked on discounting. To clear the inventory that was piling up in those massive stores, they ran constant sales. Red tags became a permanent fixture of the brand's aesthetic. This is a one-way street in retail psychology. Once you train a customer to buy your product at 40% off, they will never again pay full price. The brand equity that Ying had carefully cultivated for 30 years was strip-mined for short-term revenue. Compounding this was a profound cultural disconnect. The company was legally headquartered in Hong Kong and Germany, effectively splitting its brain between two continents. The financial directives were coming from Asia, demanding growth and efficiency, while the creative and product decisions were being made in Europe, often detached from the operational realities. European designers wanted to create art. Asian executives wanted to move units. The result was a product that satisfied neither the accountant nor the fashionista. While competitors were investing billions into seamless e-commerce integration, Esprit treated its website like a digital catalogue. They missed the seismic shift to mobile. They ignored the rise of social commerce, and by the time they finally looked up from their quarterly spreadsheets, the customer had already scrolled past them to a competitor who was faster, cheaper, and smarter. The rout was total. The bloat was terminal, and the killers were already inside the house. The decline, when it finally arrived, was not a gentle slope. It was a cliff. After years of bleeding cash and struggling to define its identity, the retreat began in earnest. First, the brand pulled out of North America, quietly admitting defeat in the very market that had birthed it. Then came the pandemic, the final, brutal stress test for a retail model built entirely on expensive physical presence. In 2020, Esprit closed all 56 of its stores in Asia. The region that had powered its rise, the engine room of Michael Ying's machine, was shuttered, but the collapse did not stop there. By 2024, the dominoes fell in Europe. Operations in Belgium and Switzerland declared insolvency, followed by the German subsidiary, historically the company's most profitable stronghold. Today, the company is a ghost of its former self. It has been reduced to a licensing shell, a zombie brand that exists primarily on paper. The workforce that once numbered in the thousands has been decimated. The vertical integration that made it a powerhouse is gone, replaced by an asset-light model where the brand rights are auctioned off to third parties. They sold the very thing that made them special, control, hoping that the logo still held enough nostalgia to generate royalties. It was a strategy of desperation, stripping the company of its operational soul to keep the lights on for a few more quarters. The current management speaks of revitalization and digital transformation, but the reality is far grimmer. They are trying to sell a memory to a generation that never experienced the reality. The contrast between this corporate wreckage and the fate of its architect could not be more stark. Michael Ying remains one of the wealthiest individuals in Hong Kong. While the company was issuing profit warnings and laying off staff, Ying focused on philanthropy and his family, living a life of quiet, immense privilege. He didn't lose a cent in the collapse because he understood the fundamental truth of the fashion business. Brands have life cycles, but cash is eternal. He built a dynasty, not by holding on to the past, but by capitalizing on the present and selling the future before it arrived. He diversified his fortune into other sectors, ensuring his family's prosperity for generations, while the shareholders who bought into the hype were left holding worthless paper. This offers a profound lesson for Asian business dynasties and global entrepreneurs alike. There is a critical difference between building a company and building a legacy. A company is an asset to be optimized and, if necessary, liquidated. A legacy is often mistaken for the longevity of the brand name itself. Ying proved that the true legacy was the wealth extraction, not the storefronts. He realized that the market had shifted permanently. The asset-light failure of the post-Ying era proves his genius in reverse. By selling the brand rights, the new management stripped away the vertical integration, the very infrastructure Ying had built, leaving nothing but a hollow shell that couldn't compete with the speed of Shein or the efficiency of Uniqlo. The empire didn't fall because of one bad season, it fell because it forgot the efficiency that built it. So we are left with the Survivor and The Wreckage. The arc of Esprit is the ultimate case study in timing. A laborer from a Hong Kong garment factory saw an opportunity to industrialize California cool. He built a global icon, not through design, but through logistics. He scaled it to the moon and then, with the precision of a master trader, he sold it at the absolute peak. He watched from the sidelines as the empire he built crumbled under the weight of a changing world, his fortune secure while the brand disintegrated. He didn't let ego get in the way of the exit. That is a rare trait in founders who often view their companies as extensions of themselves. The takeaway here is brutal but necessary. In the high-stakes world of global fashion, operational agility beats brand nostalgia every time. You cannot survive on the memories of the 1980s when your competitors are operating on the algorithms of the 2020s. Esprit fell because it forgot the efficiency that built it, while its founder survived because he never forgot that business is about profit, not sentiment. We often romanticize the builders, but the true masters are the ones who know when the building is finished. This is the core of Asian status. True power isn't just about creating something that lasts forever. It is about knowing the value of what you hold and having the discipline to realize that value before the market turns. Wealth was preserved by the founder, even as the brand was destroyed by the market. If you enjoyed this analysis of how empires rise and fall, make sure you are subscribed. We are tracking the next big shifts in the global economy. Before you go, let me know in the comments which other retail giants are currently showing these same signs of collapse. The writing is usually on the wall long before the stores close their doors. If you want to know the billionaire behind Asia's biggest syndicate, watch this video next.